The moment I realized everything was about to snap in half came on a Tuesday morning, when our new finance intern asked me where she could buy a badge lanyard. I didn't answer her right away. I just stared at the empty space on her shirt where her federal clearance ID should have been hanging. That tiny laminated rectangle, the one thing that separated our company from a six-figure federal violation, was nowhere to be seen. And she carried the missing badge like it was a misplaced accessory from a mall kiosk. But of course, no one cared, because no one understood what it meant. No one except me. For the last 9 years, I had been the company's designated security compliance liaison. A title so painfully dull it could put a caffeinated Marine to sleep. I didn't give corporate speeches. I didn't pose for company newsletters pretending to laugh at jokes that never existed. I processed federal clearance renewals. I tracked internal compliance procedures. I sat in on government audits and made sure the Department of Defense never had a reason to send us one of those infamous polite emails, the kind written like friendly reminders, but heavy enough to shut down an entire program if ignored. You don't play games with those messages. You don't lose track of compliance. And you especially don't assign federal security responsibilities to someone who thinks a polygraph machine is a fancy Bluetooth speaker. But that wasn't what the company valued anymore. 3 months earlier, our CEO's son-in-law, Evan Langford, had married into the family and magically appeared in the organization as Director of People Operations Strategy, a title that did not exist until he printed business cards with it and gave himself an office. Evan looked like someone who got lost on his way to a fraternity reunion and followed the smell of money into our building. He walked around with a tablet he never used, a protein shaker he never washed, and a constant smirk that made every hallway feel like an episode of a cheap mockumentary. That morning, I had just finished my quarterly federal report, updated clearance logs, contractor verification trails, compliance tags, the entire boring orchestra. Signed, encrypted, uploaded to the DUD portal. The same way I'd done nearly 30 times before. Everything neat. Everything correct. Then I passed Evan in the hallway. He was leaning against the break room doorframe like he owned the patents to gravity, chewing a bar that smelled like artificial peanut dust. The new intern was struggling with the badge printer again, treating it like a haunted toaster. She laughed nervously. "It keeps jamming." Evan winked. "We'll just hire somebody who knows how this stuff works. Cut the dead weight." Then he looked at me. That smirk, like he'd already imagined my desk empty. I walked back to my office, shut the door, and did what I always did when the air felt wrong. Double-checked federal regulations, archived the handover notes, and updated my personal tracking logs. The hum of the purifier and the blink of my monitor LED were the only applause I ever got, but they were enough. Systems working, procedures clean, but something in my gut still shifted. Evan wasn't the loud kind of danger. He was the quiet kind, the kind that starts with an ignorant joke and ends with a federal audit no one survives. I'd seen this pattern before. Contractors cutting corners, executives skipping verification, program managers pretending background checks were optional. And it always ended the same way, with a shutdown order and someone crying in a conference room. But I wasn't worried. I had documentation. I had records. I had my name, Abigail Lynn Mercer, registered on every single active clearance tied to the company. That wasn't ego. That was structure. I was the lock. I knew where the keys were. So when I lost access to the clearance dashboard on Thursday morning, I knew instantly it wasn't a glitch. The system rejected my login, then my admin override, then everything. My clearance showed as insufficient. A locked system in my line of work isn't an IT issue. It's a message, a deliberate one. For a solid minute, I thought maybe the government portal was performing one of its usual maintenance cycles. They loved choosing the most inconvenient times, usually mid-morning, to reboot authentication servers without warning. But then, I tried accessing the internal clearance registry, the one that never had outages. Same error. Access restricted. My own name was now classified as unauthorized. That was impossible. I was the one who approved access. I sat back slowly, fingers hovering above the keyboard as a realization crawled up my spine. Someone inside the company had removed me. Not flagged me, not suspended me, removed me. I checked my notifications. No emails from security. No memos. No messages from leadership. The silence was too perfect. Like a door closing in a soundproof room. And I knew exactly whose fingerprints were on that door. Evan. He'd been circling my department for weeks, poking around, asking shallow questions wrapped in buzzwords he didn't understand. Why do we have so many clearance levels? Can't we streamline the verification process? Do we really need to store all this documentation? He said documentation the way someone might say tax audit or expired milk. The man had the attention span of a wet firecracker, and the moment he discovered I didn't report to him, his friendliness evaporated. He wanted control, not for efficiency, for ego. That Thursday, after seeing the lockout, I walked to HR. The new HR manager, Rachel Montgomery, had been hired during the same nepotism wave that brought Evan in. Rachel had 3 talents: typing loudly, printing color-coded motivational posters, and repeating corporate jargon with the enthusiasm of a malfunctioning chatbot. She looked surprised when I stepped into her office without knocking. "Hi, Abigail. Is this about the wellness workshop registration?" She chirped, eyes bright with the kind of energy people use when they're hiding incompetence behind optimism. "No," I said. "My security access has been revoked." Her eyebrows lifted with exaggerated concern. "Oh no, that's unusual." She typed something, pretended to read the screen, typed again, then smiled apologetically. "It looks like your role has been restructured." "Restructured how?" I kept my voice even. "Well," she began, drawing out the word like it was a yoga pose. Director Langford, completed a departmental optimization review. Your position is being adjusted to align with his new organizational model. In English, you've been moved into a non-clearance administrative support function, she said brightly, as if announcing I'd won a raffle. A chill settled in my chest. HR cannot authorize clearance removal. That requires federal processing, internal certification, and proof of role reassignment filed with the contracting office. Rachel blinked. Evan said it was fine. Of course he did. Evan didn't know the difference between a clearance administrator and a rideshare driver. He thought everything worked like a smartphone app. Tap twice, problem solved. "What exactly did he say?" I asked. She looked uncomfortable. "He, said you were..." What was the phrase? "Dead weight," and that the company needed someone more dynamic in the compliance space. Dead weight. There it was. The exact phrasing he'd been tossing around for weeks like it was a clever punchline. I inhaled slowly because anyone who's worked in compliance long enough knows that anger is a luxury. Precision is survival. "Rachel, you need to restore my access immediately. This is a federal contract company, and clearance roles cannot be modified without..." "Evan said he'll handle any issues," she said quickly. "He assured us everything is simple." Simple. That word, from someone like him, was about as comforting as a smoke detector with a dying battery. I left her office knowing 2 truths. First, Evan had no idea he'd just committed a violation large enough to flag every federal oversight system within 100 miles. And second, I was no longer responsible for shielding the company from the consequences. By removing me, Evan had cut the brake lines on a speeding vehicle, and the government always notices when the brakes fail. The only question was how long it would take before the first alarm went off. The first alarm didn't come from the federal government. It came from inside our own building, though no one recognized it as an alarm at the time. Around 9:40 a.m., while I sat at my desk pretending to accept my new administrative support fate, the engineering floor went oddly quiet. That never happened. The engineering team usually hummed like an angry beehive. Printers running, servers whirring, analysts muttering in acronyms. But the noise dimmed, replaced by a sort of uneasy static. Then my inbox lit up with frantic messages from project managers, each with the same subject line. Urgent. Access issue. I opened the first one. Abigail, several of our contractors can't log into the classified project portal. Clearance tags missing. Please check ASAP. The second. Credentials invalid across 3 teams. Any update from compliance? A third. Abigail. This looks like a full system mismatch. Please escalate. My former job, was what kept projects running. Clearances linked to identities, identities linked to assignments, assignments linked to deliverables. Remove the person administering that system, and the entire house of cards collapses. And Evan had ripped out the foundational card with the enthusiasm of someone deleting spam. But I stayed silent. Let it run, I told myself. Let the system reveal the consequences of his shortcuts. Moments later, Evan strutted past my desk with the confidence of a man who believed consequences were for other people. He held a smoothie the color of radioactive toothpaste and tapped it against his palm as if it were a trophy. He didn't even notice the panic blooming behind him as engineers whispered urgently to one another. He plopped into the empty chair beside me without invitation. Hey, Abigail, quick thing. Can you forward me that master clearance spreadsheet you used to manage? I can't seem to find the version on the shared drive. I looked at him. The one that tracked every active, suspended, pending, and provisional clearance on all government-linked contracts? Yeah, he said with a shrug. That one. Should be simple. I paused deliberately. Federal policy prohibits exporting clearance data outside the secured registry. It never existed on the shared drive. He blinked, then forced a laugh. Well, there's got to be a copy somewhere. Rachel said you'd assist the transition. So, if you could just... You removed my access, Evan. He gave me a faux confused smile. It's just restructuring, nothing personal. Federal clearance systems don't do restructuring. They do documentation, authorization, chain of accountability. He waved a dismissive hand. Details. I've got it handled. He did not, in any reality, have it handled. 5 minutes later, the 2 engineering directors stormed into the open workspace. One of them, Marcus Hill, had the permanent expression of a man surviving solely on caffeine and willpower. Today, he looked pale. Who changed the registry access hierarchy? He demanded. The room froze. Evan leaned back in his chair, spinning lazily. That would be me, he announced, as if he'd just optimized a scheduling app. We're improving workflow. Marcus's eyes widened. You removed Abigail from clearance administration? Correct, Evan said proudly. Dead weight, you know? Streamlining the process. Marcus stared at him with the expression of someone watching a toddler juggle lit matches near a gasoline tank. Do you understand what you've done? Sure, Evan said, completely oblivious. Made things faster. Marcus put both hands on his head. Half our contractors just lost their clearance sync. Deliverables for the Defense Logistics Bureau will fail verification within hours. Evan smirked. We can just explain it to them. Marcus's voice dropped to a near whisper. You cannot explain a clearance mismatch to the federal government. At that exact moment, the main conference phone rang. Not the personal lines, not the project lines, the central, all-department line reserved for external federal liaisons. Everyone turned toward it. The display screen flashed. United States Department of Defense, Security Operations Division. I didn't say a word. Evan swallowed hard, the first crack in his effortless arrogance forming like a hairline fracture. The government never calls unless something has already gone very, very wrong. And they were calling us When the DoD hotline rings, you don't breathe. You don't blink. You don't even swallow. You stop existing until someone answers it. The entire floor fell silent, except for the mechanical chirp echoing through the open workspace. Evan froze beside me like he'd been unplugged. Marcus was the first to recover. He marched to the conference room and jabbed the speaker button. "This is Marcus Hill, Engineering Director." A clipped voice responded, the kind of voice that had no time for pleasantries. "This is Special Agent Randall Cooper from DoD Security Operations. We are contacting you regarding an urgent clearance irregularity tied to multiple active contracts under your organization's name." Marcus shot a look at Evan, who seemed to physically shrink in his chair, then said carefully, "We're aware there may be a temporary syncing issue. We're addressing it." "No," Agent Cooper said. "This is not a syncing issue. According to federal logs, your designated clearance officer was removed without authorization, and several active contractors lost their verified status. This constitutes a potential breach of contract conditions and may require immediate suspension of all classified work until verified." Evan blurted, "It's just a staffing change. We streamlined the role." There was a long, dangerous pause. "Who is speaking?" Cooper asked. Evan straightened weakly. "Evan Langford, Director of People Operations Strategy." Another pause. A slow inhale. "Mr. Langford, federal clearance roles cannot be modified without filing the proper authorization forms, including verification from your contracting office and submission to our portal. No such submission exists." Evan opened his mouth again, but Marcus pushed him back with one firm hand and stepped forward. "Agent Cooper, this is Marcus. We will pull internal logs immediately. I'll have an explanation within the hour." "You have 30 minutes, Cooper said. "If the issue isn't resolved, all active contracts will be placed on temporary hold pending review." The line clicked. No goodbye, no courtesy, just the sound of a hammer dropping. Evan looked around the room like a trapped animal. Okay, it's fine. We just need to put Abigail back. Simple." Marcus turned to me, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "Abigail, can you fix this?" "I could have," I said evenly, before someone removed my federal authorization and reassigned my position without documentation. Evan raised his hands. "All right, fine. I'll undo the change. Just tell me where the button is." "There is no button," I said. "Clearance access must be reinstated from the contracting portal, which only recognizes authorized signatures. Right now, you've erased the only authorized signature this company had." "That's ridiculous," he snapped. "It's federal law." He paced back and forth, hands gripping his hair. Okay, so we call them. We explain it. They'll fix it." "No," I said. "They won't touch internal authorization errors. It would violate chain of command protocols." Rachel from HR arrived then, clutching her tablet like a shield. "I heard what happened," she whispered. "Evan, did you really remove her clearance role manually?" Evan snapped. "I was restructuring. You said it was fine." Rachel paled. "I thought you meant updated reporting lines, not altering federal credentials." Marcus exhaled sharply. "We don't have time for this. We need the logs." "Abigail, do you still have your local backups?" "I had them. Of course I had them. 9 years in compliance teaches you to prepare for chaos. But I didn't speak yet. Instead, I turned to Evan. "Say it." He blinked. "Say what?" "That removing me was a mistake." He glared, chest heaving. "This isn't the time for ego. It was your ego that caused this." The surrounding engineers watched the exchange like the universe itself had paused. After several long seconds, Evan finally muttered, "Fine. It was a mistake." Louder, Marcus barked. Evan swallowed. "Removing you was a mistake. Only then did I stand. I'll give you what I have, but reinstating me requires a formal submission to the contracting office, and they're going to demand every detail about who authorized the removal in the first place." Evan went gray. He finally understood. This wasn't a minor issue. This was a federal-level disaster, with him at the center. And it was only beginning. Hunter didn't speak for a long moment, and the silence stretched until it felt like it filled the entire conference room. When he finally breathed out, it was sharp, like he was cutting the air in half. "So let me get this straight," he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Our badge contractors network was breached. Our interns were walking around without federal clearance. Our HR department was onboarding people without verifying identities. Our procurement team was using off-book vendors, and your office caught all of this while everyone else pretended not to see it?" I nodded, though the way he phrased it made the whole situation sound even worse than it already was. "I documented every finding," I replied carefully. "Internal audit has the files. Compliance has the files. Legal has the files. And I was preparing a full packet to send to the DoD liaison before I was removed from the investigation and demoted." His jaw tightened at the last part. "By who?" he asked, though I had a feeling he already knew. "Mara," I answered, and Tyler backed her. Hunter muttered something under his breath that definitely wasn't professional. He stood, walked to the window, then turned back to me with an expression halfway between disbelief and fury. "You know what this means, right?" he said. "If a rival CTO managed to confirm the breach before we disclosed it, if external investigators already have pieces of the puzzle, then the Federal Review Committee is going to assume intentional concealment." I swallowed hard. I never concealed anything. "I know you didn't," he replied, pacing now. "But the company sure as hell tried to make it look like you were the problem instead of the warning." The door suddenly cracked open and Naomi poked her head in, eyes wide. "Hunter," she said quickly, "the federal audit team moved their arrival time. They're here, right now. They want access to the full clearance roster, contractor lists, onboarding logs, and supplier invoices." Hunter blinked. "All at once?" She nodded. "They said there's a potential cross-agency security alert tied to our name." Hunter turned to me slowly. "Stay close," he said. "You're the only one who actually understands where the bodies are buried." "No bodies," I corrected instinctively. "Just mountains of negligence." "Same thing to the government," he said. We hurried down the hall, and every cubicle we passed looked like a freeze frame. People staring at their monitors, whispering behind hands, refreshing email inboxes like waiting for a meteor strike. When we reached the security office, 3 federal auditors were already inside, wearing navy jackets with the insignia stitched near the shoulder. Their expressions were professional but cold. People who had seen every excuse and didn't believe any of them. The lead auditor, a woman named Agent Callow, glanced up at us. "Mr. Reed," she said to Hunter, "and you must be the compliance officer who submitted the initial anomalies months ago." My heart stuttered. "Yes," I said. "Jordan Blake." She studied me for a beat that felt like an exam. "Your reports were unusually thorough." "Thank you," I said, though I wasn't sure if it was a compliment. "We need access to the full digital logs," she continued, "including all entries that were locked after your reassignment." Hunter's head snapped toward me. "Locked?" I exhaled slowly. Tyler restricted my access to the clearance database and vendor portal the morning after HR called me inefficient. Hunter cursed under his breath. "Then we're reinstating your access. Immediately." Tyler appeared in the doorway at that exact moment, like fate was making fun of us. He froze when he saw the auditors. "Oh," he said weakly. "I didn't realize." "Save it," Hunter said sharply. "Unlock Blake's credentials. Full access. Now." Tyler's face shifted through several shades of panic, but we already reassigned." Agent Callow stepped forward. "Is there a problem, Mr. Rhodes?" Tyler swallowed. No problem at all." He logged into the terminal with trembling hands and reinstated everything he'd stripped from me. The moment my dashboard loaded, notifications exploded across the screen. Alerts, discrepancies, backdated entries, attempted deletions. My stomach dropped. Someone had tried to cover their tracks, and they hadn't even been subtle. "Hunter," I said quietly, "you need to see this." He leaned in, eyes narrowing at the wall of red alerts. Agent Callow stepped beside him, reading every line. After a moment, she turned to us. "We will need a secure room," she said, "and we need it now." The real collapse had officially begun. The secure room we moved into was usually reserved for vendor contract negotiations or high-level engineering reviews, but today it felt more like a command center for a disaster response. Hunter closed the blinds, locked the door from the inside, and motioned for everyone to sit. I took the seat closest to the terminal while Agent Callow positioned herself behind me. Her arms crossed as she watched the screen like she expected it to confess to something. Two other auditors settled across from us, opening metal cases filled with encrypted drives and sealed evidence bags. Tyler lingered near the door, pale and sweating, looking like he wanted to melt into the wall. Hunter didn't bother acknowledging him. "Start with the earliest unauthorized modification," Agent Callow instructed. I scrolled back through the system logs, and the timestamps told a story even before the content loaded. "The first tampering happened the night after my reassignment," I said. "Around 11:43 p.m., someone accessed the clearance roster using an admin badge and altered the approval chains." "Which admin?" Hunter asked. I clicked the credentials. "It's registered to Mara." The room went so silent it felt like the air had thickened. Tyler flinched. Hunter closed his eyes briefly, as if he needed a full second to keep his temper from detonating. "Show me what she changed," Agent Callow said. The screen filled with mismatched authorization signatures, missing timestamps, and duplicated entries. Amateur-level manipulation, but enough to make the roster look legitimate to someone who didn't know what they were searching for. "She wasn't trying to fix anything," I said quietly. "She was trying to bury the omissions." "And she accessed it multiple nights in a row," one auditor added, pointing at the repeated entries. This wasn't a one-time correction. This was an active concealment. Hunter looked like he was having trouble processing what he was seeing. "Why?" he said, mostly to himself. "Why would she risk her career for this?" "Maybe she didn't think it was a risk," I replied. "She thought you'd back her, or that no one would notice, or that I'd be too sidelined to ever report it." Tyler's breathing quickened. I didn't know she was changing records," he said shakily. "She told me compliance approved the modifications." Agent Callow turned to him. "We have your digital signature on 2 of the entries." His face crumpled. "She said it was just correcting clerical inconsistencies." "Enough," Hunter snapped. "Sit down and stop talking before you make this worse." Tyler practically collapsed into the nearest chair. I clicked into the vendor system next, and the auditors leaned in again. "This is where it gets worse," I said. "The badge printing vendor whose network was breached? Mara approved them outside the approved supplier list. She claimed they were narrowly specialized and cheaper, but the invoices show inflated charges and no delivery confirmations." "And the missing badges?" one auditor asked. 46 unaccounted for," I replied, "and at least 8 of them were activated with federal-level access they should never have had." Agent Callow stiffened. "That aligns with what we were briefed before arriving. There's an active multi-agency alert about unauthorized federal facility entries traced back to unverified credentials." Hunter looked like the floor had just opened under him. "God," he whispered, "this is catastrophic." The auditors began photographing the screen, taking digital captures, carefully storing evidence in their metal cases. Every click of their equipment felt like another nail in the company's coffin. Then Agent Callow said, "Pull up the onboarding logs for the interns." I opened them, and the entire room tensed simultaneously. These were never verified, I said. Not a single one of them. Half don't have documented citizenship verification. 3 don't even have full names listed, and all were given access to restricted internal drives. Hunter let out a low, disbelieving breath. How did HR let this happen? They didn't just let it happen, I said. They processed them anyway. Which means either they ignored the missing documentation or someone told them to push them through. Tyler buried his face in his hands. Mara said onboarding delays looked bad on quarterly metrics. She risked federal violations to protect metrics? Hunter said. Metrics? Agent Callow's tone cut through the room like glass. This goes far beyond negligence. This may meet the threshold for intentional fraud. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Mr. Reed, she continued, we will need to speak with your CEO immediately. Hunter didn't hesitate. I'll bring you to him. But before he reached the door, my terminal pinged. A new alert, red, urgent, and flashing. Hunter froze. Jordan? He said. What now? I clicked it open and my stomach sank. Someone is trying to remotely purge the clearance database, I said. Right now. And the deletion timestamp matched perfectly with Mara's login. The deletion attempt was subtle, almost polite, like someone trying not to wake the building while burning the house down. I watched the terminal logs scroll in real time, entries vanishing, audit trails erasing themselves in a cascading digital blur. Agent Callow leaned over my shoulder, her expression unreadable but precise. Stop it, Hunter said, his voice cracking slightly. He pressed keys on his laptop, trying desperately to regain control, but the system refused. Every override he attempted bounced back with the same error. Insufficient authorization. Tyler looked at me like I'd just revealed some sorcerer's spell. I didn't speak. There was nothing to explain. My access had already been revoked. Legally, digitally, I was supposed to be powerless. But my final termination protocols weren't just ceremonial. They were layered, redundant, offline copies encrypted in ways only I knew how to activate. I reached into my laptop bag and pulled a secure drive I'd set aside for emergency contingency. Plugging it into my terminal, I initiated a read-only firewall override, routing the network through multiple encrypted channels before engaging the last-tier protocol. The deletion attempt froze midstream, caught in the net of my preparation. You just triggered the failsafe, I said calmly. Agent Callow didn't flinch. She simply noted the logs and adjusted her tablet. That confirms our suspicion, she murmured. This was not an accident. The auditors began cataloging the halted purge, snapping photos, hashing checksums, double-checking metadata. Hunter's hands shook on the edge of the table. I don't understand, he muttered. I authorized nothing. Mara acted alone or under your mismanagement, I said. Either way, it's on the company now. You had zero oversight after my termination. Tyler attempted to interject again, but a glance from Callow silenced him. The deletion attempt was significant enough to trigger federal alert protocols. Even a partial purge of the clearance database was a violation of Title 10 and could result in immediate suspension of all classified contracts. Hunter's mouth opened, then closed. But the project, we've got the logistics contract. Agent Callow cut him off. Everything is frozen, pending review. No work may proceed under your current authorization. Any attempt to access systems now is reportable as obstruction of audit. He slumped, realizing fully the magnitude of what had happened in the past 2 weeks. My termination, Brooke's untrained replacement, and Mara's misguided corrections had built a perfect storm. The auditors moved systematically, checking each subsystem, access logs, badge issuance, clearance authorizations, encrypted correspondence. Every missing signature, every bypassed protocol, every unauthorized entry was cataloged and time-stamped. And all roads led to the absence of a legally recognized liaison. My name, Judith Ellen Moore, was still the only one with standing authority for verification in the federal system. The irony was thick. Hunter turned to me, desperation in his eyes. "Can this be fixed?" he asked, voice low. I sipped my coffee slowly. "Sure, but not by your team. Not by anyone in this office. Only someone with the proper authority can validate the backlog, reconcile the purged entries, and submit the corrective notifications. That someone isn't here." He swallowed hard, realizing that the window for mitigation had closed. The auditors, efficient and silent, began drafting preliminary violation reports as I watched. Each click, each logged observation was a nail, finalizing a chain reaction Hunter could no longer stop. I leaned back in my chair, letting my fingers hover above the keyboard. It wasn't pleasure, not revenge. It was inevitability. The system I'd protected for nearly a decade was still operational, still secure, still undeniable. And the only person in the room who understood that was me. Brooke, seated to my left, fumbled with her tablet. Her earlier confidence evaporated. I thought copying last year's forms would be enough," she stammered. I shook my head slightly. "Hope isn't compliance. Metrics don't prevent federal violations. Experience does." Hunter's jaw tightened. His forehead pressed to the cool glass surface of the table. His empire of negligence, casual shortcuts, and overconfidence had collapsed in under 30 days, silently, invisibly, but entirely. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious to the quiet unraveling of a $200 million contract. Agent Callow stood and began gathering her team's materials. "We'll need access to your CEO for formal statements and documentation handoff," she said. Hunter nodded mutely. No protest, no denial. The entire office had become a scene of procedural inevitability, a demonstration of what happens when critical systems are treated as optional. I remained seated, calm, logging the live audit feed to an offline backup, time-stamping each entry. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and paper, tension thick in the air. My terminal blinked in quiet agreement. System secure, records intact, legal authority unquestioned. The storm had begun, and all I'd done was maintain the perimeter. By late afternoon, the boardroom had become a mausoleum of corporate pride. The emails pinging into Hunter's inbox went unanswered, each one flagged, each one time-stamped, each one a record of opportunity lost. The contractors sat idle in distant states, their drones grounded, their engineers waiting on verification that would never come from this office. Brooke, still holding her iPad like a security blanket, finally lowered it, staring at her hands as if they had betrayed her. Legal didn't move, didn't speak. No one could. Hunter's shoulders sagged, his clipboard forgotten on the table, protein bar abandoned. He had spent weeks preaching efficiency, celebrating the flattening of hierarchy, ignoring the one human who ensured the entire structure didn't collapse. And now, he was watching the consequences unfold in real time. I returned to my own office across town, the one I'd set up in the weeks following my departure from the company, bathed in soft light, humming quietly, clutter-free. My coffee sat steaming beside my keyboard, encrypted portals open, all systems under my sole control. I had not interfered beyond what the protocols dictated. I hadn't sabotaged. I hadn't gossiped. I had only ensured continuity in the absence of competence. And it had worked. By 7:12 the next morning, the suspension notice had hit every relevant federal system. Badge readers across the company's multiple facilities blinked red. Access to secure drives was revoked. Contractors could not log into networks, could not submit documentation, could not legally continue any of the projects they had been contracted to perform. The chaos in Hunter's office was silent, procedural, inevitable. The Department of Defense liaison, Agent Callow, and her team orchestrated a measured inspection. They didn't need to shout, to threaten, or to intervene personally. The systems spoke for themselves. Hunter, sitting frozen at the head of the boardroom, realized for the first time the sheer weight of neglect. "You said it was streamlined," he muttered under his breath, eyes wide, voice shaking. Across the table, Brooke fidgeted, her attempt at professionalism undone by ignorance and inexperience. "I thought copying last year's forms would be sufficient," she whispered. "It wasn't. Compliance isn't a template. It isn't optional. It's a living chain of verification, accountability, and authority, and none of it existed without me." By midday, preliminary reports had been filed. The board was notified. Joint ventures paused negotiations. Investor confidence plummeted. Emails of inquiry and alarm flooded the company's generic inbox, bouncing off automated replies and ignored notifications. Hunter attempted explanations, excuses, half-hearted apologies, but the federal notice carried a weight that no corporate narrative could offset. The systems were cold, indifferent, perfect in their design. And I, seated quietly in my office miles away, monitored every ping, every alert, every procedural flag. The network logs confirmed the outcome, each timestamp a subtle echo of inevitability. Not vengeance, not satisfaction, just order restored. At 3:47 p.m., Mara sent the final confirmation. The company's active and pending federal contracts remained suspended until compliance measures could be verified and properly documented. No fanfare, no congratulations, just protocol. I saved the message to my secure archive and leaned back, exhaling slowly. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet collapse that had unfolded, a collapse that could have been catastrophic if I hadn't acted, even in absence. Hunter's arrogance, Brooke's naivete, and the CEO's blind trust in nepotistic hiring had finally met the immutable reality of federal procedure. And as I closed my laptop, the badge from my former position, laminated, deactivated, framed like a relic, caught the soft glow of the afternoon sun. It wasn't a trophy, not exactly. It was a reminder that structure, diligence, and authority matter. That absence can be more powerful than presence. That one woman, following the rules, ensuring compliance, could stabilize or destabilize millions of dollars of federal operations without raising her voice. I didn't smile, not fully, but I allowed myself a quiet exhale. The systems were secure. My name remained the authorized record. The contracts, temporarily suspended, would only proceed with proper oversight. And the man who had underestimated me was learning the cost of negligence in real time. Sometimes you don't have to burn the building down. Sometimes you just stop holding it together, and the structure crumbles on its own. I took a final sip of coffee, placed the badge gently back in its shadow box, and let the quiet satisfaction settle. Order, once disrupted, had been restored, not by chaos, but by diligence, preparation, and adherence to the rules. Outside my window, the city thrummed with oblivious life, but inside, in that quiet office, justice, procedural, perfect, and entirely silent, had been served.